they're babies at uni these days, absolute prima donna babies. Sorry? Don't care about them then. I don't know them, so I don't care. I keep saying, you know, so they just listen to my voice, obviously, on these podcasts. And I do rude things, actually. One time I said actually quite rudely something about, and for the shits who aren't here, and I thought that is on a podcast for posterity. And of course, these students pass these things around. So I had to find a way to go in and edit it and snip it out. I do get myself in trouble. I find it very confronting. You know, so the neuroscience course that I teach in has probably got 160 students enrolled, and this year I would be lucky to have got 80. So that's 50%. That's my personal worst. And I know from other lecturers in all the unis, it's the same. They might get 6 or 7 or 8 students out of 100 turning up. So I know 50% is not too bad, but I find that very challenging because there's something about interacting that's very useful for us as lecturers, and to not have it. Yes, there are. Yeah, I was talking to some of my colleagues from pharmacy, and he ran the stats, and he gives the students the stats about. So he did he graphed the success rate. He plotted success to attendance, and it's inverse. You know, so the more it's the other. It's the same. The people who attended the most had the greatest success, like academic, in that course. Yeah. And he showed the students that, and it made a difference. And now, of course, it's not saying that attendance is the key ingredient to success. It means that the people who are, you know, we would say that's a measure of engagement. The people who can be bothered to turn up are more engaged and therefore more successful. But it's, it's a very interesting phenomenon, this. And, you know, my lectures were not at tricky times. It was like 9 o'clock on a Monday. Okay, we say they're all hungover, whatever. You know, that's not a bad time. But the other one, my other lecture was Thursday at 11. Now, if they've got a hospitality job at 11 o'clock on a Thursday that stops them from working, that's, you know, it's really crazy. Yes?
But just on the other hand.
I know, there's a foot. On the other hand, there's a foot. No, go on, sorry.
UTAS in Tasmania, just done a continuing program. Which is all.
You're going to get the box, by the way. You're going to get boxed.
I was just thinking of my experience of a program in UTAS, which is all web-based, and it does involve considerable engagement. You're right, and if you engage, you succeed, and if you don't, you don't. But it's made accessible their tremendous teaching, which has a neuroscience element in it about Alzheimer's, to over 30,000 people around the world. And if we just needed all to meet you personally, you know, we couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So I know it's irritating, but it does have its good side.
It does. And our uni is, like UTAS, really into the digital learning space. That makes the echo. So it's true. And, you know, we've got these sort of targets about having 50% of all our learning material is online. And, of course, everything that I teach is online. It is just a compromise. Anyway, I folded my arms, which tells you that pisses me off. Anyway, how did I get onto that? Oh, whiteboards. Yeah, thing of the past. Thing of the past in unis. They're as dead as blackboards. Okay, so the chapter Elusive Obvious. You ready to discuss? So do you remember the question from the learning activities, which was... What does Feldenkrais mean by learning to learn? Do you want to huddle a little bit more? It would have been nicer because you're not going to lie down. I know you like your spot, you on the spectrum, Sheldon Cooper's you, but I'm sure that the herringbone people wouldn't mind the carpet people coming into the herringbone. No, it's not herringbone. What's this? basket weaving. The basket weaving tribe don't mind the carpet tribe coming into their territory. Oh, yeah. Thank you all. Yeah, that's all right. I feel like if I sit down, I'll fold my arms and get grumpy again. All right. Well, first of all, let me ask you another question. Why did Julie ask you to do this exercise? So that you can learn to teach ATM. I just said it for you. Why else? You got to get boxed.
I think to just confirm a lot of the things we've been thinking and experiencing.
Yep. Definitely throw it.
I also like the idea of learning why ATM came into being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like that it was provoked by this guy wanting to learn, and he was really irritated that he couldn't explain what he was doing.
Yeah.
And
that was a really nice sharing, wasn't it? Because let's just say some of us have had that experience, maybe. Who's had that experience feeling really frustrated trying to explain this stuff? Who hasn't had that experience of trying to explain, the frustration of trying to explain it? So I really liked his language. He said something about, I'm jealous of the time I had to spend explaining. I thought that was really cute. There's a lot of insight into him he was very generous, I thought, in the way he shared that process. It was good.
But he also said what a nonsense.
But you got to get boxed.
What a nonsense it was to spend time with him.
Oh, right, with nonsense.
Yeah, but I think he imitated him with one word. I don't remember the word, but
yeah,
it was something that he spent that with the physio the time.
Oh, I don't remember the physio bit. Did I skim that bit? What was that?
At the beginning.
At the beginning? Yeah. I read... Yeah. So, someone explain that bit. Oh, the physicist. Yeah, physicist. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yes, that's right. So, and I thought it was a nice insight into Feldenkrais realising that he had to socialise this work, because it had been so introspective, or, Glenn and I were talking about in the break, it had been so deeply inward-looking and his own internal process, and to turn that outward, you can kind of feel the wrench that he had in doing that, which probably in some ways is something that you'll be experiencing, right? This is an intensely personal process that you're coming in here and you're working on yourself, and then we force you to work with others a little bit, but it's still your process, isn't it? So it's intensely personally developing. But when you go out to teach ATM, you're going to have to share that. And you might have these feelings of jealousy and not wanting to waste your time with other people. I don't know. What do you think? Do you want to get boxed? Oh, look at that, just plucks it out of the air. Sydney Swan. Oh, sorry.
I got the sense that it may have died along with him if that other person hadn't have come along and said, what are you doing? How is this happening? Then it made him think, wow, I really do have to share this as I'm exploring it myself.
Yeah.
Because I might have just stopped with him otherwise.
Yeah. That's interesting. And, it made me reflect too that often over the years, sometimes I just can't be bothered. People say, what do you do? And I say, I just say I'm an academic or something. And that shuts them up. Whereas if you say Feldenkrais, and it's like, I have that reaction, I just don't want to spend the time. And then that's a terrible cop-out. That's probably not a good thing to confess. Carol, yeah.
Often having to, like if you're used to working a certain way, he's used to thinking a certain way, having to document it for someone else just really makes you focus and, evaluate and revise what you're doing more.
Yeah.
Hence he learnt the ATM. Yeah. So it was a challenge for him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there is, I can imagine he would have been frightened in a way too, because when you start to operationalise such an internal process, you'd really worry that you're going to lose something. I think we all grapple with that, don't we, as sort of teachers of the work, is if, you know, we're constantly reviewing our work, are we reducing it to simple sets of rules because it's easy to teach that? And if we do that too much, will we actually lose the creative flavour of the work? So he must have worried about that. I know that in the physio world, there was this guru physio, Marissa would know, Jeff Maitland, or any other, doesn't matter if you're a physio or not, yes, you know. So he was the guru in Adelaide and internationally. And I've talked to quite a few of his students, and they know the point when he flipped, when he had to operationalise his techniques. And I talked to one of them who married a Feldenkrais practitioner, so he understands the way we think. And he noticed that he thought, Jeff, this Maitland guy, did all these amazing techniques, but he did them incredibly creatively, and there wasn't a pattern, and it wasn't, you know, kind of operationalising this, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this assessment, find this, do that technique, do this assessment, reassess, blah, blah, blah. It's very structured. And my friend Neil remembers the time when some other students said, you won't be able to teach that. You're going to have to change it in order to teach it. And it became what our generation would have been taught, which is this highly procedural, you know, step A, step B, step C kind of technique. Well, that's the way it came across to me. So it's really interesting, isn't it, that when something becomes, you know, culturally shiftable, sometimes it loses a flavour. I think that probably Feldenkrais still, if you talk to the original students, I reckon we've done a pretty good job at not letting that reductionist thing happen. But anyway, that might be my conceit. I don't know. Well, we watch each other very carefully to see that we're not, you know, and we look at, you know, when someone comes up with a template, we go, template. Oh, and we go, oh, that's okay. It's still, you know, people still can be creative. It's true. When people started teaching FI templates, we'll go, no, we go, oh, well, it's okay. It's okay just as long as you don't get stuck there. Anyway, box. Sorry, hello, you're new, and you're Martina. Is it Martina?
I'm Martina, yeah.
I'm Susan.
I'm an OT, and I noticed, you know, with having done OT for a long time, that sometimes you think things are so basic, but for your clients, they're not basic. Yeah. And that's, I think, where templates come in. You know, it always reminds me a little bit to go back to basic and not assume that someone understands something because you have done it 100 times and you think, oh, it's so clear and so simple.
Yes.
I think that's where templates help to get you back on track.
True. That's true. Yes. And I think that's a really timely reminder about yesterday. So you were here yesterday, but yesterday we started to create a bit of a checklist for you to think about when you're teaching ATM, things to remind you to not take for granted. And I think you came up with all the really good ones that now have become part of your DNA, you know, like working towards ease, using pleasure, less is more, going slow. Those kind of basic, you know, rules, if you like, that underpin every ATM. As I kept saying yesterday, they are counter to our culture. Our culture is about being fast, about, you know, no pain, no gain kind of stuff. You know, like you've got to try your hardest. You're not trying your hardest, you're not going to do your best. You know, you've got to go, success, that's right. So that whole idea about errors are fine. They're actually interesting. That, you know, you've got to shoot for success all the time. Otherwise you're a failure, etc. So those basic ones, we can't lose sight of them. And you can't forget that for the people on the floor that you're teaching, this is challenging. I mean, you might still find those things challenging yourselves. Okay, so let's... oh, sorry, yes. Oh. Does it hurt when it smacks you in the face?
No, it's very gentle. The thing that got to me was that he's teaching people to teach themselves to learn again, to learn how to learn. And I thought that was really, to think of when you're teaching people, you're actually teaching them to learn for themselves. So that sort of made a bit more sense about the way he does the structures the lessons and things.
Yes.
Because, you just don't realise how many people don't have that awareness to start with.
Yes.
And it takes a while to get that.
Yes. Yeah, it is. It's right. It's a different kind of teaching.
Children do it first.
Yes.
They just do it straight off. And then that's gone.
Yes.
As we get older, because of this cultural right and wrong.
Yeah. So that's a nice segue. He talks about the way children learn. What are some of the other features, other from your experience of what he said around the way children learn? Simon?
I just had an answer to your original question.
Oh, yeah. God, what was that?
What did we get out of it? Why did Julie ask us to do that?
Yeah.
I know why Julie asked us. No, what I got out of it was I find, and in particular that chapter I think is a really good example of a lot of his writing, in that a lot is covered, and it's really kind of the various concepts are interwoven through it, and it's quite kind of holistic, but there's no real section that is identifiable as, this is the bit about learning and this is the bit about. So in reading through it with some particular questions in mind, it really helped me kind of extract different bits of meaning or what was meaningful to me in reference to what is learning and what's the process, and which was great, because after I'd compiled that list, it was like I got to see all of the different things that we're told are the Feldenkrais learning attributes and the different things, but in his voice through reading that, and I just found that really useful.
That's useful, because it reminded me, I'd forgotten that she asked you to read it through like a story first, and then reading with purpose, which is a really, really useful technique, and parallels a lot about the way we work, is that we watch somebody with this global, just watching them with no big question in mind, don't we? Don't you think that's one of our kind of ways of operating? And then questions will emerge and we will re-observe somebody moving, or so that's a really useful process. It's maybe not unique to us, but it's to just read with that kind of blank canvas thing first is really useful. Look, and remember that when you start to do FI, because everybody thinks with FI, oh God, the practitioners, they know what they're going to do from the start. Well, just remember that. Remember that thing is when you first start working with somebody, you may just simply be observing what they do and, not have anything in mind, and not to panic about not having any questions in mind. That might be going too far into the future, but some of you might remember it. I think that's just... it's a podcast, so you can go back and revisit it. You can chipmunk me. You know what that is? That's when the students, they listen to your podcast and they put it on fast. So it's like, but then they can hear it quicker. So a 50-minute lecture they can hear in 30. Me faster. Yeah, that's right. That's what I said to them once. I said, am I even, can you understand anything? Me, chipmunk, just does my head in, because I'm already too fast. I already have to think about slowing down. Anyway, yes, the box has gone to...
I suppose I was just saying I sort of like to think of it in terms of not knowing, and like you were saying, just being comfortable with that. And I think that encourages a really nice state of relaxation.
Yeah.
Even though we don't like to use that word. But.
We can use equipoise. I give you that word. It's my gift.
Good place to begin.
Yeah. So we'll park the relaxation word. When we talk about tonus, we'll talk about why we don't like it. Yeah. Pardon? Equipoise is, it's neither tense nor relaxed. It's the Goldilocks word. It's the not too much and not too little word. If something is in a genuine state of equipoise, as it were, it means you've got the potential to be this or that.
Just on that phrase that jumped out at me from it was, learning means grasping the unknown, which I thought was really beautiful.
Means what? The unknown? Grasping?
Grasping the unknown.
Yeah. Very good. Okay, so if we continue on with this
Sorry.
Yeah.
Just on that, I noted a bit that interests me was he described why he likes to tell stories during ATMs, and that was because people are very tired or finding that something's terribly difficult, and then and he likes to keep them alert so that they don't get into a completely relaxed state.
Yeah, so it's keeping them connected but in a slightly different way. Yeah, and of course if the story's got a metaphor in it, then it will be deeply connected. And you'll hear us teaching, and on Friday we're going to, did I tell you this? We're going to have the ATM teaching panel. Did I tell you that? Well, we've got some extraordinarily good ATM teachers in the room. So we've got Fran and Lisa and Ruth and Jenny. So I'm going to interview them. Didn't I tell you this? I've got a bit of I'm channeling Jenny Brocky. Was it you that I told? At lunchtime. I'm channeling Jenny Brocky, the SBS Insight. You know, I don't dress quite as bizarrely, though, I'm just saying. And we're going to have this panel and we'll interview them, and then you can ask them questions about how they teach, how they prepare, and they're even prepared to share their bloopers. Fran offered because she's evolved. So that's Friday, all right? So you can think about that. This is your big opportunity to ask all the questions and hear from the experts. Okay. Why did I get onto that? My fantasy. I don't know. I don't fantasy about metaphors. So someone brought that up yesterday. Who brought that up yesterday? Is that one of the features? Yeah. So why metaphors?
Because someone
box yourself.
Because people may relate if you keep on using the same word. Sorry, I keep on saying that like another word, if you keep on giving different variations of words, that might click or resonate with that person rather than something else. And then you notice if they're trying to get a move, then all of a sudden you say that correct. I know within myself, you say some other word and then go, oh, I've got it. Now I can do this now.
Yeah. And from a neurological point of view, the way the brain's wired up, that's finding an association. So it's like they haven't got the wiring to understand these words, but you sneak in like the back door through a metaphor and they've got, oh, I recognise that. So there's this recognition thing that the brain does, and then it can link this new learning to that old learning, and it's a very satisfying thing to do. So it's that kind of associative learning in a way. That's what we're so good at doing. It's a very, very useful tool.
The jellyfish, to me, is not very good.
Yeah, so now here's the rub with jellyfish, is that for some people who've got a jellyfish phobia, that would have freaked them out and they would have wanted to run away. And for other people, it really helps. So that's the rub with metaphor. So there's often, Feldenkrais will use a metaphor, like when you're doing a scan, you read some of his transcripts and he'll say, sense the space under your back, could a mouse run under it? Now, who's got a mouse phobia? And whose tonus goes up? Like, the thought of that. So that's the thing, but it's the 80-20 rule. 80% of the people go, mouse, who cares, whatever. Oh yeah, no, it's not big enough, or yes it is. And 20% will be needing therapy. Or you get over it.
You just say a large cockroach.
Yeah, that's right. Perfectly fine. I think the 80-20 rule would flip with cockroaches and spiders. Snakes. So, there's some other imagery ATMs that you have to think about. There's one, I don't know if you've done it, where he actually gets you to, I've taught it in here, but it's not this group. I can't remember which group it was. Where he actually invites you to slice yourself down the middle and insert a glass sheet. And it's actually a fantastic ATM. It's a wonderful ATM, but it's terribly confronting. And as a teacher, that's a really hard metaphor to sell. Like, you've got to have a lot of confidence, and you've got to have a room that really trusts you. Now, I think that must have been Alan's training, and they would eat out of anybody's hand. They were there's a lot of trust in the room. Every group in this room has been really good.
And there's the one about the ceiling coming down.
Oh, yeah. So, you know, you just have to feel your way, really. Glenn, have you met the box? Feel introduce. Yeah.
Just on the glass one,
Yeah.
Frank Wildman does one of those as well. And I did it, and then I did it with my wife, watching her do it, because there's not much movement in it. And in between every rest, because my wife's Japanese, so she doesn't speak English clear enough to hear everything Frank says, so I help her through it with some of the things. But every time she rested, she straightened up.
Isn't that interesting?
It was
so that image of the line.
Watching her, because she was slightly over to the side and up, and she's just doing this thing, and every time she rested, she'd just straighten up. And I always thought she'd get, like, I was expecting to get really uncomfortable because I'm explaining, yep, that's your guts going out, because that's how he does it.
Yes.
He says, you might imagine your guts going out, or like your viscera, he calls it, I think, which I didn't even know was a word, but apparently it is.
Yeah.
But, you know, explaining the blood going up and down the glass and all that, and I thought she'd be very against it, but
you see, don't know. And this is the thing with metaphor too, is you can project your own problems, as it were. Yeah.
No, we did a workshop with Zoran this year in Sydney. I know Dan and I did it. And it was looking at the liquid in your body. Were you there for that? And it was quite amazing. It was a real turning point for me, because we've been concentrating on bones or part of the body. And this really allowed you to see that there's a whole other element. And we ended up, this is always a great element of fun in Zoran's workshops, lying on our back with someone. And do you just want to lie down, John? And we were...
He's worried what fluid you're going to find.
He hasn't got much fluid, but some of us... And doing this sort of action, and suddenly you could feel all the fluid in your body. Yeah, and we used a balloon, and it was just amazing. It gave you another dimension of your body. And this is an amazing thing to do. I'm not really doing what we did, but it goes all the way up to your brain. And it wasn't it amazing, Dan? No,
oh, right.
We were changed.
Yeah.
So, you know, again, it was amazing.
Well, I'm going to ask Zoran about that.
Endless.
He often sends me his stuff, but he didn't send me that bit. Very good. Okay. Other learning principles that you want to bring up? I'm particularly interested in the ones that you didn't get. Yeah, and I'm also interested in, so there might be a principle, but how do you do it? Like, what is it? You know, we can write up all these lovely qualities that an ATM has, but what is it? How do you do it? That's the interesting. That's what you guys are going to have to figure out.
So this was
all on your own.
This was the line, because I highlighted, I do not treat patients. I give lessons to help a person learn about himself or herself. Learning comes by the experience of the manipulation. But then I just kind of forgot for a second what the manipulation was.
So
I get confused with that word sometimes.
No, we don't. Sometimes we do. Jochanan Ryrand, whatever, how do you say his last name? Jochanan. Yeah, that word. He called them manipulons. So when we actually move somebody, that's the manipulation. But we tend not to use that word here because people think of it as manipulation as in that. What he means is when he's, during the FI process, when he moves somebody in order for them to feel it. So that's what he means. Does that answer your question? But you can see why we don't use the word. Because in our culture, a manipulation is actually extremely passive. You know, it's an expert putting you in a position that you couldn't get into voluntarily and going beyond physiological, you know, to do that. So that's why we don't use that word. But we move people around. But it's a really important passage, and you've had this language beaten into you right from the start, is that we do not, and he corrects himself several times too. He says, when I work on someone, or more accurately, I work with somebody, right? Because a manipulation is working on somebody, and that's fine. If the relationship is an expert and a patient, that's absolutely fine. But that's not our relationship. Our relationship is a teacher and a student, and we're working with somebody. And it's, what's the first part of that sentence? Because he puts it very nicely.
I do not treat patients. I give lessons to help a person learn about himself or herself.
That's tattooed on your brain, right? That's the difference. So we're not health professionals in that sense, that we don't treat patients. And we're not saying anything against the medical model or the health professional model. It's just different. It's complementary. Yes. Someone's used the word complementary before. Complementary and alternative. The alternative gives me a bit of grief, but I think complementary is better. Okay, so let's talk, well, anything can come up, obviously, but are there some learning principles that you think are difficult to achieve? Seeing it's going to be your responsibility up to a point. Yes. I don't think I've picked up your name.
Silvana.
Silvana.
Yeah, there's a lot. I'll make it easy. Banana, sultana. There's a whole lot I can roll off to you.
Yeah. I was thinking more in the silver lines, but you're not a silver person, so no. Yes, you is. You wear silver. Okay. It'll happen.
It'll happen, yeah. So the thing that interested me the most in reading this work, and this is what I picked up, pockets of where he keeps alluding to self-direction.
Self-direction?
As a learning principle. And that intrigues me because it's the one that I probably struggle with the most. Even a year and a half into ATM, I still find lying on the ground that, you know, if I'm stumbled by an instruction, rather than trying to self-direct myself, I still go listening for more to take me there. And so that one I think is quite difficult, not just if you're doing something that you're capable of doing, but when I think of people that may have a disability, children or adults, and I think, well, how does this notion work? If you're working with someone that is limited in what they can do, how can you promote or help find a way for them to find this self-direction within themselves? And what I love about this method is that it comes back to focusing what you can already do. So you can find a way to self-direct yourself if you're going through a path that's already familiar. You can end up somewhere completely different. Whereas in society, we tend to direct ourselves in different places in the unknown rather than channeling through what we already know. So, yeah, but I constantly struggle with the concept of keeping yourself directed. And I think he's telling us, learn, you know, I'm trying to teach you how to learn. And a big part of that is you being able to self-direct yourself to continue learning rather than blocking yourself like we tend to do.
Yeah. I think in a way you've just demonstrated, I think all of us would think you've got a very good handle on self-direction. So you might feel like you're not very good at it, but I think you actually understand it really well just from the way you talked about it. And there's nothing wrong with in an ATM, we are there to help guide the self-direction, and that's not a contradiction. Guiding self-direction is not a problem, because that's what a parent does with a child. And when I work with people who are severely disabled, I'm just thinking of a couple of little boys that I work with at the moment. Their problem is, if they say, it's not a very nice way to language it, but their issue is they've got too many choices. When they try to move their arm has all these degrees of freedom and they can't constrain it. So that's not like, you know, they're the opposite of someone who's stiff, who can only move like this. You know, they're constrained by their mechanics their neurology to move in a very limited way. A lot of these little chappies that I work with, too many choices. So my job is to limit their opportunity for self-direction, really, you know, like put constraints on them so that they can have more control over smaller things. So the self-direction stuff is always in context. And I think it reminded me of one of the rants, as I like to call them. I say that affectionately, you know, in Amherst with this series that I'm teaching of the Bell Hand, where he talks about the difference between, in our culture, we don't sit now. Apparently, in 1,000 years, not 100, several hundred years ago, we used to spit a lot in the street. And he had a rant about, you know, Western governments had to bring in a law to stop people spitting, which of course then everybody wanted to rebel against the law, and they had to bring in fines. If you spit, you get fined. So all the signs were just about, if you spit, you're going to get fined. And his point was it should be self-directed, is if everybody was educated to know that if they spit, this was in the time when they discovered that how TB was passed on, you know, that the tuberculosis, you know, those little roddy things are in spit. And one of the ways it was being propagated was people spitting in the street. So his point was you can either make a legislation and a rule and a fine and punish people to guide their behaviour, or you can give them information and they can self-guide. And they can choose not to spit because they don't want to give TB to everybody. I think that's a really useful image around the self-directed stuff, is if people have enough knowledge, then chances, unless they're a psychopath and they want to kill the whole world by spitting on them, as opposed to chopping them up, or, hey, in the US, just buying a semi-automatic weapon and shooting them all, you know, we will, by and large, as a species, make the decision that's good for the species. So I think that's really useful. That sort of, I think that's the same kind of track. So the behaviour might end up being the same because we are actually all essentially similar in the choices that we make, but one is clearly a choice of free will. And it's based on his big thing he talks about in this chapter, is that the awareness that he's talking about is not just simply knowing, but it's the knowledge that comes with the awareness that because then it feeds into better decision making. That's what he's after. And that's where your self-guided comes from, is that within the ATM, actually we don't want to, as a teacher, you do not want your students to go free range on the floor and start doing everything and anything that they want.
No, exactly.
So it's a bit of an illusion that you can try anything that you want, because actually you don't. And it's a bit of an, you know, because there are rules, you know, small R rules, but there are, so we don't call them rules, we call them principles, because somehow or other that feels better. But, you know, it's not undisciplined.
No.
And I think, you know, sometimes people can think that self-directed or self-guidance or is just feral, you know, it's just out of control stuff, and it's actually not if it's based on this idea of knowledge. Behind you, Glenn.
Buckminster Fuller used to call it enlightened self-interest.
Enlightened self-interest,
which is a term I actually prefer, but you don't have to.
Who said that?
Buckminster Fuller.
Buckminster Fuller. The Dalai Lama calls it wisely selfish or something. Or selfishly wise. No, wisely selfish. You can be self-interested, but if you do it with wisdom, it's fine. Ooh!
Didn't go far enough. Sorry.
It's Martina.
I really struggle with that concept of, you know, self-guidance. Even you try to explain it in some ways. Because I'm one of these people who have been learning the hard way. I always go as far as I can and as much as I can and as fast and so on. And I've done some damage to myself along the 2 years. And I know when I teach ATMs or observe other people, then I can see that there are people like me around who don't,
oh, heaven forbid,
self-guide too well or learn. The enlightening can have some damaging effects in between. And that's where I'm a bit struggling. How much, when I see people, how much would I restrict them? And when I go to ATMs, I often see that instructors don't inhibit some very damaging movements. So I mean,
it's a good conversation to have, because it reveals a lot about your fears, not you in particular, but people's fears about what self-direction, self-guidance really means. And I think if we were totally into self-guidance, we would just send you all off with defective knees, like Feldenkrais did. To my mind, he's the only one who did this work under real self-guidance principles, because there was only him. And then none of us have to do that, because we're working with teachers, you know, practitioners. So we don't have to be so frightened. Now, I'll tell you what my first reaction was to yours, is don't project your own fears onto other people. And that's a pretty big statement, but it's a really important one. Because if you start going nanny on people, it's not a Feldenkrais ATM either.
I work with older and disabled people.
Sorry?
I work with older and disabled people.
Yeah, so don't go nanny on them. Like, really? You talk to Margaret Mayo. Have you met Margaret Mayo? Yeah. You?
Yes, I did, and I had some damage.
Oh, okay.
So
all right.
Probably
okay. So, well, sneak past Margaret Mayo's window when she's teaching ATM. She's got her house bursting to the seams. Like she's got people in the passage and spilling out into rooms. Or she's got this big studio and people spilling out the passage and into a piano room. Her ATMs are that popular. And I'd kid you not, the mean age would be 90. And she's contemplating headstands with them just because what the hell, why not? Because she has got this pack of older, aging people who have had very full lives, and she takes them on this journey. She teaches Alexandriana, which can be quite complex. They have such faith in her, and she has such faith in them and in the work. And she's, your experience notwithstanding, I'm not discounting it. They come back for more, and they've been coming back for more for years. And it's inspiring because these people who are 90, in their 80s and 90s, and there's young people as well, so they're not all old, do extraordinary things, and what that does for their self-image is extraordinary. So that's the counter-argument. Now, you're absolutely right. We have to create a safe learning environment. And that means, and this is what I want you to think about from an operational point of view, how are you going to do this, where you set up an environment where it is safe for people to explore? And that does not mean sending them onto a desert island with Bear Grylls. That's not a safe learning environment, right? That's just fear and ridiculous. We don't see the shorts of that stuff. It's just crap. That's what I think is that's just self-guidance gone crazy. We're setting up an environment where there are actually very clear parameters about self-directed direction. You only self-direct within these guidelines. And that's your responsibility as teachers to set that up. And if you see somebody who is moving too fast or moving too far, or they're exploring a range, or they're in a configuration that you are confident is injurious to them, your responsibility as a teacher is to go up and quietly pat them on the shoulder. And that's why we have staff here all the time when we're teaching, and we're constantly wandering around watching you. So that responsibility is very real. However, it's got to be tempered by some kind of reality check about, you've got to calibrate your responsibility to their responsibility. And what this is all about is that ultimately they are responsible. You've set the principles down, you've set the rules, and if they go too fast or too far, it is their responsibility. And just like we will give them all the credit if they learn something and have an aha moment, that is them. That's their self-efficacy. If they hurt themselves, that is them. And it sounds like the get out of jail free card, but it's actually, you can't have it both ways. You can't have, if they have success on the floor, that's all there. They can take full credit for that. If they hurt themselves, it's the teacher's fault. That's not the negotiation. Yeah? That's a harsh way of saying it. Any comments for anybody else? But that's it. Now, I'm being hard on you, Martina, because we've had students in here who turn into nannies. I don't know you, and you might not be a nanny. But I remember one beautiful woman in here. I love her to bits, one of the trainings in here. And she was the ultimate caring person. She was bosomy and nurturing. She just had that. She was like Madonna, just not the pointy tits Madonna, Earth Mother. And she would criticise the way we taught ATMs, because she'd say, you don't get people comfortable. We should be, putting more pads under their heads and putting things under their knees and doing this and that and making people more comfortable. She was a yoga teacher, right? She was used to taking care of someone. And we just look at her and smile and go, how many times do we have to say, make yourself comfortable? And up to a point. And if we see someone is really uncomfortable and they just don't know it, well, of course we'll go up and suggest this. But she wanted us to pad everybody up to within an inch of their lives so that actually, in reality, they wouldn't be able to move. And at the end of the training, she came up to me, she said, I understand what you mean now. Because every time she'd come up and give me that feedback, I'd just smile at her and kind of, yeah. She just thought I was being passive aggressive, which I'm not. I'm just aggressive. But she finally got it. Because what she was doing, she was projecting her own fear of discomfort and taking responsibility for everybody on the floor. And it's a shared responsibility. And she was denying people their opportunity to feel uncomfortable. Now that sounds weird, but it's actually true as well. People have to learn how to get themselves comfortable, because I'm not there in their bedroom at night to help them. Now, and if you see somebody really struggling, what we do in practice is if they're really struggling in an ATM, obviously if we can see, we go up. Some people hide their struggles very well though. And in your real life practice, if that happens, they're the people that you would say, look, can I suggest that you really come and have an FI with me? And we can really explore, because there's some boundaries that you keep pushing through that are not good for you, in my opinion. And let's just explore those together so that you can experience for yourself how you keep hurting yourself. But can you hear my language? It's how you keep hurting yourself. And it's not in how you keep hurting yourself. It's not this finger wagging you're hurting yourself, but it's just in the same, this is how you keep improving yourself. This is how you keep hurting yourself. It's all the same to us. That's a bit of a rant. Is that all right? You feel picked on? Oh, I'll try harder. Maybe you're getting more passive than aggressive. No. Just aggressive. Sorry? Yeah, we're assertive, aren't we? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, one of the ways that he mentioned he sets up this not needing to succeed is the first movement doesn't evoke what the final movement will be. So he sets it up so that they don't need to go all out and achieve it. They're just doing something very within their realm.
Yep.
To set the tone before the big finale.
Yep. And there's another strategy that he uses, that if someone's doing something that's kind of wrong, what does he do? There's another strategy that he uses. Sue?
To actually watch them and see and suggest that, why don't we all try it that way? Which gives the person a chance to look at themselves again in a new way. Yep. It was a great idea.
Yep. And if you get 3 people doing that, and people have got 3 different ways of exploring, and they can feel themselves, that really doesn't work for me, or that really does work for me, or I hadn't thought of that. So then that brings in that, I would never think of doing that. So then the possibilities for self can open a little bit, even if you then say, well, no, and if you've set up the situation correctly so that they can choose, and they know, like I did this morning, with your head to the left or to the right. Now, the general public have never asked themselves that question. So that speaks directly to what Martina's saying, is that people can hurt themselves, because if you don't go through that process of understanding why this or that, then of course people hurt themselves because they've never probed. So that little exercise is self-direction. Even though I then said you have to turn your head to the right. That's because I'm, But you also set up, you also set up in the room that if you feel that you really cannot lie with your head on the right, let's say you've had then you set up in the room that it's absolutely okay to not do it. So Carol's got a shoulder, that means that there's some things she can't do. I could see that yesterday and today, and then she told me about it, and that's the environment that you set up in the class, that you feel absolutely fine, that you've got a limitation at some point, and it's absolutely fine to listen to that. So as teachers, you have to do that. You have to set up that as a ground rule, that this is what you will not tolerate people tolerating pain. That's the safety net. Yeah.
I was just going to start a slightly new point about it, but something that you've brought up a lot about the idea of, is it okay to move on from that? Is everyone ready? Yeah. You've said a lot about how you used to think that people, practitioners could just see everything and everything was always clear. And there was, I too, when I like first started, and even now sometimes I'm like, how much can they see? How much are they? What is really going? And so this paragraph in here where he talks about...
Did you really have all of that for breakfast? I can't believe you ate that much. No, I don't know. I'm just making that up. I'm just pretending like I can read you.
So then when he says, speaking of awareness, like I've found even students of mine make the mistake of thinking I recommend them to be aware of their actions all of the time that they're awake, and thinking about when I first was doing ATMs and when they were like, walk away and have this with you through the day, and trying to work out how much of that to keep with me and things like that. Between these two segments, I was walking along one day and I was, I'm always slightly aware of my walking, enjoying it or whatever, but not in the forefront of my mind. And then a twinge started happening like in here or something. And I went, oh, well, maybe I could just walk differently. And that was my moment for that paragraph, going, oh, that's why I've got options.
That's the self-guided business. That's all he means. It's that simple. I've got options. Not unlimited. It's not free range feral. I've got options.
Yeah.
I can't start walking on my hands or... Oh, can you... Yeah.
No, not like I'd like to, 60.
No, I'm not going to... I guess it's not free range, and I'm not going to pull a gun and hijack a car.
Yeah, but I don't have options walking on my hands.
Oh.
That's for sure. But yeah, I think though as well, like you're not going to walk trotting along the street all the time. Like you're not just going to like be like, I can walk however I want, but then if I get hurt, I'll choose another option. So I remember though, before Feldy, like I would have been like, oh, this really hurts, and continued to do that, continued to have it hurt, gone to see someone who probably wouldn't help it, would tell me that there's something else wrong. And I felt like really, good about that moment, and good about realizing that it's not like someone can see stuff all the time. Because I used to, I still have a friend, but we haven't been hanging out as much, but she's an F5 person, and I used to be like, how is she sitting? How is she looking at me? And I'm like, oh, I think I'm starting to understand it's not constant.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is nobody will know you as well as you. It's just that you don't know that you know you. That's what this work is about, showing you that you do have the tools to know you better than anybody else can ever know you, including us. Yeah. And that's a great example. And the other really powerful thing that's happened for you is that you've lost that fear thing of and that the responsibility stuff about the twinge. Even your language was different. Before I would have got a pain and I would have done this, that and the other. Immediately gone to get expert help because this is not my body. This is a problem. I need somebody else to fix it. So that switch in language, I cannot tell you how profound that switch is. And that's actually, the hardest thing for us to do with, to do this terrible language from me, with clients who come to us who still have they are in the mentality they've got a pain and they want us to fix it. How we can language it that, oh, you are feeling this, you would like to learn how to do something differently. Exactly that. And that is that's what the gift is that we have to offer, and it's extraordinarily profound. But some people don't want it because they want the expert to fix it, and you also have to say that's perfectly fine. But we're not that person. We don't dispense drugs and we don't do manipulations. We don't fix anything. So that's really, really, really useful. Does that story make sense to people? Yeah. And it wasn't a fear response. That's the big thing. The self-guiding thing wasn't out of fear. It was out of curiosity. There was the valence wasn't fear.
So if you had a client that came to you to say, I need you to fix me type of mindset, would you still continue to treat them and see them?
I give them a little talking. We have a little discussion about that's not how I work. Yeah. And I don't have those skills to offer. That's why, yesterday when I said the sort of physio that I was never that kind of physio who has those skills. I'm not a healer, never have been, I never will be. I don't have those kind of manual skills. I'm very upfront with people. So I actually very rarely get that. Everybody knows that I'm not that. I've never worked like that. And I think, the physio world, if you're, working in neurology, no one knows you're not going to fix anything because they've got a bloody head injury. Like everyone knows you can't fix a head injury. All So people already, even if they know that I'm a neurological physio as a sidekick, they wouldn't expect me to fix them necessarily, up to a point. But it's a long conversation, this helping people to make this shift in responsibility, this shift from becoming passive in the face of pain and discomfort to becoming an active, to actively owning it and working with it. One quick story about this is that I always felt like I was never particularly good at helping people make that shift because I didn't have that in my repertoire. And for a while I worked with some friends in a practice. There was 3 of us Feldenkrais practitioners, and they were quite innovative practitioners, and we used to have to score our clients on the Enneagram. I don't know why. I'm not quite sure why, but anyway, this is Helen and Lynn. So the Enneagram, amongst a million other things that it does, is is it 1 to 9 or something? And there's a sort of a pathway of sort of self-actualization on there or something. And 1 is when you are 100% passive, like you are the victim of everything, blah, blah, blah. And through to 9 where you are fully, in control of everything. This is a very reductionist view of Enneagrams. Don't take this. So we used to have to score people where they were on that. And so it was quite interesting because that practice had a lot of people on work cover, a lot of people on third party and, insurance kind of things, as well as self-referred. And what we worked out was, and I say their names, Helen and Lynn. Helen is extremely charismatic, very persuasive. She's sort of in the Marg Mayo kind of category of, obviously didn't persuade you, but you know what I mean. This is all being taped. Really, really convincing, but in an authentic way. Like I'm saying this and she could work with people at that 1 or 2 level where they'd come in extremely passive, distressed, and she could help them move around to a 5 or so where they're really starting to take responsibility and the language changes and they start to say. Lynn was really good for people sort of 3 onwards. Me, unless they came in at a 5. I just didn't have the skill set when people came in with that distress business. I think I would be better now. This is very early on after we 5 years after we graduated. So what is it that Helen could do? How did she work with people that helped them move? I mean, it's a $64 million question. I think I'd encourage you all to examine who you feel most comfortable working with. She loved working with people in that situation. So that's one of the ingredients. She was really interested in their worldview. And what did she do? What did she say? How was she? How did she operationalise that? I still think I'm really interested in what Fran's got to say or Jenny about this because I think it's it's probably hugely off topic, but not really. Because these are the people you're going to have on the floor. You're going to have the 1s through to the 9s lying on the floor.
Just wondering on that note, I wonder if they were drawn to her charisma, wanting some of that, and it was their response to... Maybe. Yeah, all I know is if I've got a 1 or a 2... like that, like they were kind of... Yeah. I think that's true. It's a two-way thing, isn't it? It's a two-way thing. You're absolutely right. A relationship is always two-way. It's not one or the other. Fran, do you have I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
Okay, well, I think that...
Who are you good at working with?
What?
Who are you good at working with in that spectrum? All of them.
Oh.
I reckon you could sell coals to Newcastle. I reckon you could do it.
Yes, the nightmare clients are the ones who come in and you say, "What is there anything you'd like me to work with specifically?" Or, no, whatever. Whatever you do is going to be fine. And it's like, oh, isn't that a terrible moment?
Yeah.
But no,
your egomaniac goes, right, yes, I'm going to do what I like.
Yeah, I think it's useful to have some active listening skills and to really hear what the person is actually saying, because it's always a layer underneath what they come with, isn't there? And I think some NLP skills are very good as well, to move people on towards a 5.
Yeah.
Or a 9. Yeah, because I've worked as a psychotherapist for so long, I'm good at listening and good at picking up the secret message or the hidden message.
But what's keeping them in that passive way of...
Well, I mean, there are people who don't want to get better. That's another thing.
Yeah.
They do want to be fixed, but they don't actually want to get better. And I'm not a physio, so I'm not getting the kind of clients that you would be getting. But I think you've got to make it interesting for them, setting them tasks, go home and try this. And they like homework. They love homework.
Yeah, I think that's a real key.
And if you've got a CD maker, make a few lessons that you can give them the CD and just say, go and do this lesson at home, little 15-minute ATM. Things like that are very helpful.
That's certainly my filter, is when people phone me for an appointment,
yeah,
I say, I will require you to do homework. And I say it, and people have told me off it, when I've said that in trainings, I say, well, that's very harsh. But I have very limited spots in the week, and it sounds arrogant, but it's not that expectation is not negotiable for me. If people aren't interested in working, because I very rarely see people more than once a fortnight. That would be my max quickest frequency. So they have to take responsibility right from the start. And they go, oh yes, no, of course I will, yes. And I don't mean homework as in just 6 repetitions of this and that. It's a lesson. They have to do awareness training.
Yeah, well, I like in our training program we had Maturana, who's a very famous biologist from Chile, who worked with Varela on systems theories and way back in the 70s, I think. And he used to say it's important to be in language with the client. So let's just say you have a plumber who comes and he's got a bad back, and you've got to be able to speak in language with somebody whose world is made of U-bends and so on.
And poo?
Really, and poo, and taps that, and taps that switch on and off and so on.
Yeah.
Not literally, but metaphorically.
Yeah.
And it's like you've got them on your side immediately.
Yeah,
so
that's really good.
And he also used to say that a Feldenkrais session is a conversation. And if you go back to the Latin meaning of conversation in Latin, it's cum versare, which is cum means with, and versare means to turn or dance with another. So if you can think of it as a conversation from the very beginning, where it's not just a one-sided monologue.
Yeah, and it's not you as an expert lecturing, it's you questioning
and stay as Socratic as you can with questions rather
than
statements.
There you go. That's the thing too. If someone's really passive, you ask them questions and they have to become an active voice. Yeah. Very good. Yeah. Danielle's got something. Thank you, Fran.
I was just thinking before when we were talking about metaphor that as well as us all having, or groups of us having particular or maybe individual experience, there are deep common stories, and that metaphor, is ancient and it comes along with archetype. And well, for instance, just you telling us about Goldilocks, that there are ways that we can use shared story, is what I'm saying.
Yes, yeah.
Perhaps less and less in a modern world. We're more fragmented, but even so, we do respond to those almost mythical notions, and I think that's a way to reach people other than yourself, which is all often going to happen.
Yeah,
hopefully.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Even when the metaphor doesn't work, it can really work. I work a bit in Larry Goldfarb's training in Amsterdam, and we teach in English there, which always makes me feel a bit rude. But the Dutch people are so fabulous with their language. Anyway, so we teach in English, and I was using the Goldilocks. I said something about this is the Goldilocks principle, and I didn't know what Goldilocks was in. They are archetypal stories, but this group was so fantastic. This became a really rich thing because they scuttled off and Googled that story in what it would have been in the Netherlands and in Germany, and there was an Italian and some Russian. So they found that story existing in all these in their original cultures, and it became a really rich discussion about how our cultures have these stories around this finding equipoise, essentially. And I can't remember what the stories were, but it was a very, they will never forget that now because it failed. My metaphor failed, but they were such a good group, and like you all are, because you're curious and they're good learners. And they went away and found it, and it became, my failure became a really fabulous thing. It was really good.
So, I mean, what we were just talking about there, this question of moving from passivity to efficacy.
Yeah.
You know, that's like in all ancient mythology in a way. And I think we can find allusions that we can make that'll have deep, deep associations for people.
Yeah. Interestingly, I find it much harder, that shift with the FI situation than with ATM, because ATM in and of itself demands self-efficacy. And that's why I love it, notwithstanding Martina's comments that people can still, because it is your process and nobody can say it's not your process because I'm not touching you. So the more I work, the more I think FI is fantastic for a really focal kind of assault on things. You know, it's a really intense learning experience. But the long-term learning, where people really learn to learn, is ATM. And I'm just, the older I get, the more I work, the more I'm a fan of ATM. You know, and we kind of, because we do it first, we dismiss it as the simple business. I actually think it is the business. And the FI is something that we do to tidy up. That's, I don't know what. Because of that self-efficacy stuff. Because it's just, you just can't get away from it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that really resonates for me, that when I've had FI, I've been amazed but somewhat bewildered.
Yeah.
And that motivated me to do the learning.
Yeah.
So I suppose they both have a role. But
they both have a role, absolutely have a role. And your name is? Gabby, is it?
Madhavi.
Madhavi. Oh, beautiful. Yes. What does that mean?
It's an Indian Hindi. It says, sorry? No. It means intelligent.
Intelligent?
Yeah.
Oh, Madhavi. Right.
It's actually...
So now the right person has got the box.
Oh, no.
Now we're going to hear something intelligent.
No. Too much expectations. I mean, it's an adjective. So if someone gets something, someone achieves something, then that's called Madhavi, that name.
Oh, okay. So can you give us an example?
So it's like you know, you are top ranker in a class, or you achieve, then they will call like Ella, Madhavi Ella. Like,
okay.
So it's a title.
So you could be Madhavi Madhavi.
Oh. So the point I want to make is that you just mentioned about the ATM and then tidying up the FI business. Yes. I find it like ATM really helps to start, like, you know, answer to your question as well. I bring them into that zone.
Yes.
From here to there.
Yeah.
Where they're not completely relaxed, but not completely, you know, hyperactive.
Yes.
And somewhere in between, and then do FI.
Okay. All right. And how do you do that? What are your skills? What are your tricks? What are your strategies?
Definitely start talking what they want. Again, trying to find out.
Yep.
I ask questions, and some of them are relevant. Some of them are just, I don't know. I just ask. And again, the information they give it to me, some make sense. Some is like, I don't know, what is she saying? So I'm okay with that, you know, being unknown, and be comfortable with it, and then start the process, make them lie and start the ATM, bring them, scan, and just come and then do some work with them. And
So there's something, this state that we're talking about, let's call it the state of equipoise, the Goldilocks state.
Yeah, that's what,
So the characteristics of this is there's territory for learning to learn, because you're not committed to one thing or the other. And this probably gets into the self-guidance area, where you're not deeply committed to one thing or another, but you have a receptivity, which if you're completely relaxed, you've actually committed yourself to switching off, which is, now I've just given you the answer to why we don't use the word relaxation. You've committed to not doing anything. Equipoise is you haven't committed to doing nothing, you haven't committed to doing something. It's equipoised. So, someone sneeze. So that's, and how does somebody experience that state? How do they get into that state for learning is a really interesting thing that I want you to muck around with. So Medhavi has got some strategies to help people.
And I really find, and they, you know, when I finish, I could see that they went in sometime, you know, sometime I can't, sometime I can. And I could totally feel that, yes, I could bring them there. And sometime I'm like, I think, no, I'm going to do something more. They want something more in my tone, in my voice, or some instructions so that they can come. And I usually get very good feedback that they actually could tell that, yes, I was not what I am, and really positive feedback about that, being in that zone. They love it.
So I would imagine, so Medhavi's already given us some clues. It's tone of voice and it's pacing of voice. It's the conversation that Fran is talking about. There is a to and fro business where the content may or may not matter. It probably does. There is probably something about the way you're organised. So we have to be in that state of equipoise too, because if we are really committed to action, like we're Action Jackson, then they are going to respond to Action Jackson, and they're going to know that something's going to be done to them because we're Action Jackson. If we're super relaxed and committed to doing nothing, then they will respond to that too. So why we're banging on a lot about this state of equipoise is because that's where we need to be. So we need to be in that learning to learn frame of mind, which is a physical frame as well. So does everybody can just roll your eyes around your head a bit and try and remember when you've all been in that state, right? You have an experience of that state? Yes. Should we check the box?
Thank you. I just want to make one little comment about that personally, about working with people who are in that state is often terrifying. So if you've got somebody who's had a trauma.
Oh, and they're in equipoise.
Yes, that they are hypervigilant.
Okay.
And it's terrifying to be in that zone where you don't know what's going to happen next. So I just wanted to say that's
right. Okay.
Not a cautionary tale, but simply to watch people's eyes, for example, their breathing, their lips getting dry. You know, there are signs that you'll learn about as you continue to study. You want to say something about that?
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah, that's as good as doing this and rolling over. That's fantastic.
So I have experienced that. There was this person who came and she was having really chronic pains from last 10-15 years. She's one of my friends. And I thought, let's try to, just voice tone and bring her. And then she couldn't. She was just started having headaches. Her eyes were just so jumpy that, she was just taking really big breaths. And I felt like, oh my God, what am I doing? I really did I something do wrong? I didn't touch. It was just talk, voice, line. And then I thought, okay, so because and we talked for half an hour before I actually put her on mat. But still, I think she was not ready. But because now she's coming from last, every week once, now she can come. So I think first few sessions, not ready.
Yeah. And that's where people are on a spectrum, right? And this takes us into the ideal, the question of what's ideal. And if somebody is hypervigilant and ramped up Action Jackson up this end, to get them to what is the ideal kind of equipoise, no, it's not going to happen straight away. All you're after is a little bit of a state of flux up this end of where they're at, so that they've got two choices up that end. They can be even more hypervigilant or slightly less. Do you know what I mean? That's where your approximation thinking comes in. That's the first approximation, not that we're going to the ideal. So, ideal posture. in the chapter. What do we think about that?
I think
right up for your soft voice.
If I read it as it should be, it just woke up for me this sense of the head being free.
Yeah.
And I was struck when we were doing this morning that you could even be lying on your face on your front, which you'd think your head was completely stuck, but you could still find a place where you could actually still move your head. And that doesn't look like an ideal posture, but
right.
I think it's so much about that.
So it's this, where you are finding a freedom. Can you just...
The head can, he talks about how in all sorts of situations we respond to things by putting our heads into an orientation where all of our organs can work in some sort of equilibrium, so your eyes can see out and you can hear stereoscopically, I suppose, and everything you can sense is possible, and you have the scope to go to that place. So it is a kind of equipoise, I'd say. It doesn't actually mean standing straight or standing in any way or sitting in any way in particular. It's more
so you're free to orient would be another way, you know. Teleceptors are for orienting, and if you're free to orient, then you know where you are. If you know where you are, you're well on your way to knowing who you are, actually. I work with people who don't know where they are, and it really stuffs them up. Like from a vestibular point of view, they don't know where they are. Yeah.
But the right direction can be very helpful. I was lying on my stomach this morning, and I was turned to the right and to the left, sorry.
I was going to say, I'll turn to the right.
To the left.
That's what I do.
And
turn right, I say, quickly, turn right. And I wonder why people don't turn right when I'm doing this. Anyway.
Initially it was in the middle.
Yeah.
And then just as when you said turn to the other side, and I hate turning to the other side, and you were saying, just adjust your legs a bit, the length of your legs. And that made such a difference. Just the difference of your comment at the right time. Yeah, it was wow.
So these are the little tricks you'll pick up as ATMs, little things that you've heard from other people or you felt yourself that make a difference to helping with comfort. They won't win for everybody because nobody else in the room probably that made any sense for, but it will always make sense for one or two, or having the arm up or taking the shoulder back. And we'll talk a lot about that prone stuff today. So these are going to be little strategies you've got in your head about helping people to be comfortable up to a point. So ideal, Deb, your ideal. Oh, okay. I'll hear what it is, and then I'll see whether we want to pursue it or not. You'll feel judged. Don't worry.
Do you get clients to sign waivers?
Do I what?
Get clients to sign waivers?
No, I don't. I've got insurance.
Anyone? Does anyone? Any practitioners?
Does anyone
for ATMs?
Do we have clients sign waivers? No.
So to take their own responsibility if they get, like in a yoga class or something else like that.
We will carry insurance. Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Well, they do it in other classes, in other...
Do they?
Oh, yeah.
Like cross...
Anything, yoga. Anything.
Really?
You can't do a yoga class without signing a waiver. Yeah. It's about the client taking his own responsibility. Not in an FI so much, because but in an ATM.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
We have waiver forms for kids doing circus, and I think it's not so much about the point that, you know, we have insurance. If something goes wrong, we will look after them. But I think it's actually more about the point of the people bringing the kids to the place, accepting that it isn't, like there is risks to what we do.
Oh, okay. All right.
So I think
in a way it's a consent form.
Yeah, exactly. And it comes across as a waiver, but it's more like this is what's
happening. So in research we have consent forms too. We say, here are the risks. Do you still, you know the risks, are you still willing to do it?
Yeah, which is legally helpful, but they still
consenting.
Ultimately get help.
Okay, we might leave that thread. Because no, it's an important point, and it makes you think about the self-responsibility stuff, and it does hark back to how do we set up a benign situation so it's not legalistic, but it's that there's a tacit understanding that you will take self-responsibility, and it's, you know, we would, that speaks to the Feldenkrais story about spitting. Do we legislate for self-responsibility, or do we educate so that people choose self-responsibility? And you as teachers are going to set up an environment where they willingly choose self-responsibility, because you have convinced them that self-responsibility is the only way they're going to improve.
Every child's party, you have to sign consent.
Bloody hell.
Yeah, every single one.
Oh my God. Okay. All right. Yes, it's extraordinary. All right. I choose self-responsibility, but you can impose it if you have to. All right. Ideal posture. Who's got one? You keep it in your back pocket. Bring it out on occasion. Can we see it? Yep. So we talk about this mythical ideal posture a lot. And he said, the line that I want to remind you of, he says it doesn't exist, right? We work towards it. Having said that, Viv.
Posture, or actually having your head free and your pelvis free.
Head free, pelvis free. Yeah, these are key features. That's a Questellian thing. Are your eyes free to pelvis free? What do we mean by pelvis free? Sitting like this, my pelvis is not free. My pelvis is committed to going backwards, right? I'm not sitting in an ideal posture. Fran's pelvis is not committed either way. She could just as easily fall back to sleep as she could stand up. Can you see the difference between hers and mine? Right? So that's this equipoise business as well. And her pelvis is free. Doesn't mean it's levitating. It's not that free. It doesn't mean she's, licentious and she'll give her pelvis away to anybody. That's what we mean by free. Or she could lean down and get something to her right just as easily as she could lean down to get to her left. That's the difference, and that's what Viv means, is your pelvis free. And that's really important. Yep. Did you wave? Oh, Dan, sorry.
Yep. I think what interests me was, because I'm getting a deeper understanding, or not, I've just started to think about it, is the degree of tonus in one side of the body, or say when you're turning over your vertical axis, and how you switch to have the weight over one side, and then there might be that, like we were doing this morning with the calf, the different tonus as you kind of turn over one side over the other.
Yep, good. So tonus we're going to put aside, because you're not going to run on my parade, young man. I've got a whole lecture about that. No more talk about tonus. Very good though. That's important. Did you, or was it Glenn? Glenn, were you just waving at me before just because you were friendly?
You might need to shelf it, because I was going to say along the tonus, sort of the equipoise between the flexors and extensors, for example, that perfect balance.
Good point. Yes. Hold that thought. I'll call on both of you later. Glenn, is it ideal posture?
I hope so.
Good.
Recently, I've been going back over a lot of my old training materials, which is old stuff, like how people used to train 100 years ago, 150 years ago.
Before Feldenkrais was alive, you mean?
Yes, but a lot of it is based on how you hold yourself within different movements and how to get into those movements. And I'm finding using the Feldenkrais stuff with that is just getting incredible results with the people I'm working with, and things that used to take me weeks, like sometimes minutes. You know what I mean? Like, but working on this idea of that it's not solid. Yes. Like there's no solid posture, and these guys were into that idea of that you tense up or you hold yourself in certain ways, but with the ability to move. So there's a freedom that goes with these old style workouts and this old style training, and I'm finding this all hitting at the same point. But
so this speaks to something that's current that people will relate to, is my beef, and I'm trying not to slag off other approaches, but my problem with the way Pilates has been interpreted is that it is this brace, that we have to have a strong core. Hit me there, it doesn't hurt, no way, I'm a man, right? That kind of thing. That I've got this core and it's like this big belt around me and I hold on to it, and it's not equipoise, right? That your whole gut wall is committed to being short and tight.
Well, these guys, if you look at the older training and that, a lot of their core training is about actually using this to make it fluid. so that you can hold it in different positions. So you're holding here, this is tight, like learning.
Yeah, and we don't use the H.
Operate
and the H word gets misinterpreted, the holding.
Yeah. But there's about holding to move, like to be.
Yeah.
No, I'm not talking about the current. I'm talking about the old guys.
Yeah.
It's about mobility. It's about being able to go from this position to that position.
Yeah, and it's about a muscle being able to go from short to long.
Yes.
And that's not holding, right?
No, I know I'm using the wrong
language, and that's what.
Sorry,
so that's these are the words that we jump on, and we jump on them for a reason.
Yeah.
Because of what they evoke in somebody's head, and you talk to women's health physios, for example, and this holding mentality that people have now, this bracing mentality, means there's all these women who now their pelvic floors are so bloody high. Oh, more cake. What, the cake? Yeah, I'm into it. Carbs, yum. That they're holding everything and it's indiscriminate. And that's, we like discrimination in this method. And this indiscriminate holding means that these women are, everything's short and tight all through their pelvic girdle, including their pelvic floor. And women's health physios are going nuts because these women can't let go of their pelvic floor. So they've got these really short, tight, high pelvic floors that just are good for nothing and leak. They leak. Fran would know better than me, not because she works with people, because that's her area of work. They're so cheeky. All right, so it's coming. So this, yes. So this idea of ideal is very much around this ability for whatever we're talking about to move in either direction, for a muscle to move in the direction of shortening or lengthening, for it to work, not work, and almost anything that you can think of. That's where we have this ideal that things are free to go left or to go right, to go up or to go down. Yeah? So this ideal posture thing, remember he says it doesn't exist, we work towards it. Simon.
Really enjoyed his discussion about beyond the physiological aspects of what ideal posture is, but his whole concept around knowing what you're doing means you can do whatever you want. And so talking about the chaste young woman who chooses to have her legs clasped together when she's sitting, or the liberated man who splays his knees apart, and who's to say that both of these people aren't actually sitting in the ideal posture for them in any given point in time, if they are aware of what they're doing and they are freely choosing to sit like that or to stand like that or anything. I just find that a very liberating and exciting kind of definition of putting yourself in position.
It's marvellous. Yeah, this is a really, it is such an important point for us, is this non-judgmental stuff, because immediately we start talking about ideal, we think that there is one perfect thing. But if the ideal posture is defined in terms of function, it's acture, as Viv said. It's not a posture. It's not a fixed one. It's not Michelangelo's vision of the ideal posture. And it is. I think liberating is the great word. And if you can impart that level of acceptance, you can operationalize that idea. When you're teaching ATM, your clients will be so happy because they're not being judged anymore. Because they'll come in and they'll say, oh yeah, my chiro, my physio, my doctor said I've got to sway back, my legs are sloppy, or, I've got bone on bone in my knees, or, I've always been dumb at school, or they'll come up with this litany of judgments about all this stuff. And we're not interested. We can just go, that judgment, we just put it all aside. And it's really us helping them to just probe that they're making the best choice. That's all. And it might be exactly the same way as you probed turning your head left or right this morning. No judgment about, you lefties are actually facing left. Well, I didn't look at the news. Do we know? So we don't know whether we're looking left or right either, from a political point of view. Okay. I'm so disoriented because today feels like Tuesday to me. Anyway. Oh, yeah, yeah.
So they've actually delayed it a little bit. So
make sure that they don't cock up the box. So we might 2 weeks, and we're still working out whether we look left or right most comfortably. Okay. Well, I tell you, when you give the power to the people, like with the Brexit thing, I'm not sure that that's a good idea. I was there for that, but it was just sad. Anyway, okay. So what else do we need to say about ideal postures? Ideal anything. The other thing, just to contemplate in that chapter, when he talked about everybody can become better, which is not just so, and that's coming from a place where we're already given our information. We presume that people are making the best choice that they can given what they understand, and we can always move to a position of being better. Always, even the Olympians, he sort of reveres sports people in a way that I don't, but or he is not just any kind of super performance. And it's that kind of language that I'd like you to think about when you're teaching ATM, is that you give people the possibility that they can always become better. And what they're doing now is the best that we had a discussion actually last time I was teaching, not here, but with that neuroplasticity thing down the road. Someone said there's this assumption that we always make the best choice in whatever action we're doing. It's not quite true. We make the best choice based on the information that we have. But what's the problem is that we have very limited information. So we keep assuming that it's the best choice. And again, I'll hark back to the turning your head left or right. You made a choice to turn your head one way based on habit. And do you ever probe that is still the best choice? Could we add more information to the system so that you can check, is it still the best choice? And in that context, the girl who sits like this, does she know that she's always making that decision? So is she aware of that decision? Is it based on good knowledge? If we gave her more knowledge, so this is a really good way to not get pregnant. So if her outcome is to not get pregnant. Marissa, you didn't learn this. Where's she? Sorry, that's a rude joke. But it's not a good position to, let's say, play the piano, to have your knees locked together. Right? So if she had a different function in mind, she might need to rethink her choice about how to sit. Or the guy who sits like this, he might rethink that choice based on knowledge that he's sitting in, a tram coming out to Box Hill, and he is seriously pissing off everybody around him because they have to sit like this because he's doing this, or something like that. Is that a spurious enough example? So we honour we pay homage to the decision that they've made, and then we help them to probe, is it still the best decision in these other... We're going to get so fat. You're just going to bring in a cupcake, aren't you? On you, Carol. All right, so is that enough about ideal? The ideal. Yes. We have equipoise. Lunch? Yes. Okay, 1 o'clock. So we'll come back at 2 o'clock.